So the other day I decided I was going to be a helpful husband. Big mistake. I woke up with this sudden burst of confidence, probably fueled by too much coffee and a dream where I was a responsible adult. And I thought, I'm gonna help my wife around the house. Today, nothing can go wrong. That's the hook. I thought it was gonna be a small thing. I thought, how hard can it be? Famous last words, right? She asked me to handle one simple task, literally the simplest thing in the universe, but I had to make it dramatic. I had to approach it like it was a life or death mission, which is my specialty. I started off strong. I said, I got this, don't worry, with all the confidence of a man who's about to fail spectacularly. And of course, she smiled that calm, trusting smile that only wives give when they know they're about to watch you implode. She had no idea the chaos I was about to unleash. I walk into the kitchen thinking, this is my moment. This is where I shine. Then immediately I get distracted. There's a sponge over there. A dish towel is slightly off center. Suddenly, instead of completing the task she asked me to do, I'm reorganizing the cabinets. Because in my mind, helping isn't just doing the thing. It's doing everything around it that might also be slightly off. The more I try to help, the worse it gets. I try to fix the faucet while folding a towel with one hand and simultaneously taking out the trash. At some point, I drop the towel into the sink, turn on the water, and instantly realize I have no idea which lever does what. Water is spraying everywhere. I panic. I'm thinking, do I turn it off? Do I leave it on? Maybe if I leave it on, it evaporates. I'm yelling at myself while my wife calmly walks in, looks at me, and just raises an eyebrow. That's when I know I've officially failed at helping. And the hook here is the look she gives is worse than any yelling. It's like she's measuring exactly how much of a disaster I can be in 30 seconds. By the time I stop panicking, the task I was trying to help with is not just unfinished, it's actively worse. The kitchen is wet, the towel is ruined, and the trash is now scattered across the floor because I tripped over it while trying to fix everything at once. And she doesn't say anything at first. She just looks at me, smiles slowly, and that's when I realize helping is a trap. She doesn't need my help, she just wants to watch me attempt it. And the closing is, I finally walk away, soaked and exhausted, and mutter, next time, I'll just stand here and look helpful. And somehow, that's when she laughs the hardest. Because in the end, trying to help my wife is never about success. It's about turning a simple task into a full-blown comedy show where I'm the star and also the punchline. So it all starts with this moment of overconfidence, which is always the beginning of any disaster I'm involved in. I wake up one morning and decide, today I'm gonna help my wife. And instantly, I feel like a superhero. Not a regular husband, not a guy who forgets things and makes minor messes, but a man on a mission. The hook here is that confidence is dangerous. It's like putting a toddler in a Tesla. I have no idea what I'm doing. I feel unstoppable. I even say out loud, I got this, don't worry. Which is the first mistake, because saying it makes it real. My wife smiles at me, that calm, trusting smile that signals she has absolutely no idea what she's in for. She thinks this will be a small, cute attempt at helping. I already know in my head that I'm gonna make it unnecessarily complicated. That's the hook. My brain has this gift for turning the tiniest tasks into epic failures, and I haven't even started yet. I start imagining all the things I'll do to help. In my mind, helping isn't just doing the task she asked for. It's fixing other things along the way. Maybe a cupboard is slightly crooked. Maybe the towel is misaligned. Maybe the faucet has a drip that I can't explain, but am somehow compelled to fix. So I step into this mission thinking I'm improving the house when really I'm signing up for disaster. The hook is that I can't just do one thing. I have to do everything at once, which always ends poorly. I rehearse it in my head like I'm preparing for a Broadway performance. I even imagine her reaction. Wow, Nate is amazing. When really, by the time she sees me, the water's gonna be spraying, the towel is gonna be wet, and the trash will have ended up in the middle of the floor. And the panic builds immediately because I overthink everything. I walk toward the kitchen thinking, okay, first step, stay calm, one simple task. Then I see a sponge, I see a dish towel, I see crumbs on the counter. Suddenly, I feel the weight of the world. The hook here is the contrast between intention and reality. Thinking I was competent, but now everything seems like a high-stakes mission. I try to breathe slowly, but I can't, because I already know that failure is lurking somewhere between step 1 and step 2. That's the classic Nate Bargatze scenario, ordinary life, ordinary task, and somehow it becomes an extraordinary catastrophe. Rehearse my words, I'll handle it, which in my head sounds confident and heroic, but in reality, the calm before the storm. By the time I lift the first dish, I'm already questioning every decision I've ever made. I check the faucet like a man diffusing a bomb, fold the towel like it's an Olympic event, glance at the trash like it might leap off the floor if I ignore it. The hook is that all of this is happening in my head while my wife is calmly smiling at me, totally unaware of the disaster about to unfold, which makes everything exponentially funnier. That first burst of overconfidence is always the start, the spark, the seed of chaos, and it's the most important part of the story because without it, there's no comedy. Without thinking I could handle it perfectly, there's no reason for the absurdity that follows. The next part of the disaster starts the moment I see my wife's calm smile, which is honestly the most dangerous smile a husband can encounter. It's the kind of smile that says, but really means, you're about to fail spectacularly. I can't wait to watch. The hook here is that the contrast between my panic and her serenity is what makes this funny. I try to act confident, standing a little straighter, nodding like I fully understand the gravity of the situation. Inside my head, it's chaos. I keep repeating her instructions in my mind, but somehow, the more I repeat them, the less they make sense. She says, just do the thing. And suddenly I'm thinking, which thing? The thing I heard 5 seconds ago, or the thing I imagine, or the thing that would be a mistake to do, but also looks like help. I've learned over the years that my brain has a very specific failure mode for even the simplest household task. Activates immediately when my wife trusts me. I start pacing, thinking I need a strategy. I check my pockets for no reason, patting them like maybe if I touch my keys enough, the solution will magically appear. The hook is that confidence is inversely proportional to competence. And right now, my confidence is through the roof while my competence is somewhere under the couch cushions. I rehearse in my head, Nate, breathe slowly, remember the task, focus, don't panic. But of course, it's already too late. My thoughts start spiraling. What if I drop something? What if I spill water? What if I pick the wrong sponge? And each possibility becomes more catastrophic than the last. My wife is just standing there, completely calm. I can feel her measuring my every micro movement like I'm auditioning for a role I'm doomed to fail. That silence, gentle smile is the ultimate hook. Funny, terrifying, completely relatable to anyone who's ever tried to help and realized halfway through they were in way over their head. Then I start overthinking every simple action. I pick up a towel and notice it's slightly wrinkled. I hesitate. Do I fold it? Refold it? Maybe it's not straight enough. And just like that, the tiny task snowballs into a full-blown internal crisis. I glance at the faucet. I consider the sponge. I even glance at the trash as if it might give me advice. Every choice seems like it could result in catastrophe. The hook is that all of this is happening in a space no bigger than a kitchen over a task that takes most people 5 seconds. Over complicating the ordinary in a way that only Nate Bargatze could make hilarious. The audience knows exactly what's coming before I do. By the time I take a first real step toward completing the task, my internal panic has reached Olympic levels. I am analyzing my movements, over planning and imagining every possible outcome. She watches quietly, still smiling, and the contrast is perfect. My nervous energy versus her calm gaze is the comedic gold. Every tiny slip of confidence, every little hesitation becomes a part of the story. That hook, the calm smile against my escalating panic, is what makes this part of the performance both relatable and hilarious. Setting up the chaos that's about to follow in full spectacular fashion. The real chaos starts when I try to actually do the task, instantly decide that the best way to help is to multitask everything at once, which is, of course, a terrible idea. I pick up the towel, glance at the faucet, and notice crumbs on the counter. And before I know it, I've committed to folding, scrubbing, and organizing all at the same time. The hook here is that my brain thinks helping means doing everything smart, not just the thing I was asked to do. Try to carry the towel over to the counter while adjusting the faucet and somehow knock over a cup of water in the process. The more I panic, the more I keep adding tasks in my head. I'm like a guy trying to solve 3 Rubik's Cubes while juggling flaming torches, except the torches are dish soap bottles and the Rubik's Cubes are literally just towels. I glance at the trash and think, maybe I should take this out too. Because obviously, doing a small task isn't enough. Everything has to be perfect, even though I have no concept of what perfect actually looks like. So, after all of that chaos, I've learned something very important. Sometimes helping your wife isn't about getting the job done. It's about surviving the attempt. I walk away soaking, exhausted, wondering how a simple task could possibly destroy so many things at once, and she just smiles like nothing happened, which is somehow the funniest part. The truth is, no matter how hard I try, my help always ends in disaster. That's marriage, right? You try, you fail spectacularly, you make a mess. Somehow she still laughs and maybe even appreciates the effort. And I've finally accepted my role in our household. I'm not just a husband, I'm a walking comedy act. A live demonstration that even the simplest job can become a full-blown catastrophe if Nate Bargatze is involved. As I start moving around the kitchen, I realize my balance is off, my concentration is gone. I'm probably making things worse with every step. I grab the wrong sponge, which feels wrong the moment. It touches my hand, but I convince myself I can make it work. I start scrubbing and water sprays everywhere. My towel slips, lands on the floor, and somehow touches the wet faucet, which now has a drip. And the hook is that I'm not even 2 minutes into helping. Everything is spiraling out of control. I panic slightly, trying to fix one problem while accidentally creating 3 new ones. My wife is watching this silently, Smiling, which is somehow worse than yelling, because her calm is terrifying. It's the calm before the storm, and I feel like a man who knows he's failing spectacularly, but is powerless to stop it. Every movement becomes exaggerated. I bend, I reach, I stretch, and it all feels like choreography for a disaster ballet. Smart, the kind that only happens in your own kitchen when you're trying to be helpful. I start talking to myself under my breath because the silence is too much. Okay, Nate, focus. Fold the towel. Turn off the water. Don't slip. Don't drop anything. Don't look at her face. And of course, the second I do this, knock over the trash can. The hook is that nothing is sacred. Every ordinary object in the kitchen becomes a potential weapon in my attempt to be helpful. Even consider asking my wife for help, but immediately dismiss it because that would mean admitting defeat. Fully committed to failing solo, and somehow that makes it funnier. At some point, I realize that I've been working on this tiny task for 10 minutes and accomplished nothing, except I've accidentally rearranged the entire kitchen and created new puddles of water. The absurdity of trying to do the simplest thing while multitasking becomes the entire comedy of the moment. That hook, the escalating chaos, my growing panic, and her calm observation is what drives the story. It's relatable, ridiculous, and completely in the style of Nate Bargatze, turning ordinary domestic life into a full-blown comedy show where I'm both the hero and the disaster. By the time I notice how badly things are going, it's already too late. The kitchen is a disaster zone. Water is dripping in places water has never dripped before. The towel is soaking wet. Somehow the trash has ended up half inside the bin and half on the floor. The hook is that I thought I was helping, but at this point, it's clear I've escalated a simple task into a full-blown emergency. I try to rationalize my actions. Maybe she'll appreciate the effort. Maybe she'll see the chaos and understand that my heart was in the right place. But deep down, I know it doesn't matter. My wife doesn't need me to try. She needs me to succeed at something she literally described in 3 words. The more I look at her calmly observing me, the more I feel the pressure. That smile she gives, innocent, trusting, is the same smile that says, "You're about to fail. I'm gonna watch every second." It's terrifying and funny at the same time. And the hook here is the relatability. Everyone knows that look, and everyone has felt that helpless panic. I begin trying to clean up as I go, which is like sweeping water into a pool. I pick up the towel, wring it out, and suddenly the faucet leaks again. The hook is that every small solution I attempt only multiplies the problem. Try to organize the counter while drying the floor, but my movements are clumsy, exaggerated, and completely uncoordinated. Every step feels like I'm defusing a bomb while wearing roller skates. I glance at the trash again and think, maybe if I just move it slightly, no one will notice. That thought lasts for half a second. Before it slips from my grasp, I realize nothing will go unnoticed. Every tiny misstep is amplified because my wife is there, silent. They're smart, watching like a judge at a talent competition where the only talent I'm displaying is chaos. And here's the hook. I start talking to myself under my breath, trying to reassure myself. You got this, Nate. It's just a towel. It's just a faucet. It's just the trash. But talking doesn't help because the moment I focus on one thing, another disaster manifests. I lift the towel again, and water splashes onto my shoes. I adjust the faucet, and the sponge slips. Bend down to pick up the trash, and somehow the floor is stickier than it was a second ago. Realize I've created a feedback loop of failure. The more I try to fix, the worse it gets. That is classic Nate Bargatze comedy, ordinary life, ordinary tasks, blown out of proportion simply because the intention was good, but the execution was disastrous. I glance at my wife, who has not spoken a word but is clearly judging my every move. The hook is that her silence is louder than anything she could say. It's like a sound effect that plays every time I mess up. I freeze for a second, realizing that no matter what I do next, firmly in the horribly wrong zone, and the audience knows exactly what's coming before I do. Each movement is more ridiculous than the last, and I am fully aware that I've turned a small task into a comedy sketch. Somehow, that's the funniest part, me, a grown man utterly defeated by a towel, a faucet, and a trash can, while my wife calmly watches it all unfold. By this point, the chaos has reached a level I didn't even think was possible in my own kitchen. And the hook is that the more I try to control it, the more out of control everything becomes. I'm standing there with a dripping towel in one hand, a slipping sponge in the other. My brain's screaming at me to stop before something else goes wrong. They're smart, but of course I can't stop because stopping feels like admitting defeat. I glance at my wife, who is still silently judging me. I realize that her calm gaze has somehow become the loudest sound in the room. It's worse than yelling, because yelling would at least give me instructions or maybe a chance to explain myself. Silence gives me nothing. I feel the weight of every choice I've ever made in my adult life, all culminating in this one moment where a simple task has turned into a disaster so elaborate that I'm impressed by my own ability to fail. The hook is that failure has a rhythm, and I am performing it perfectly. I try to fix one thing at a time, but every attempt only creates more problems. I wring out the towel. Now the water from the faucet has pooled into a small lake on the floor. I grab the sponge, and it slips, landing in the puddle I just made. I bend down to pick up the trash, and suddenly the floor becomes even slipperier, and I'm doing this awkward shuffle like I'm auditioning for a dance I didn't know existed. And all the while, keep mumbling reassurances to myself. It's okay, Nate. You got this. You're helpful. But the moment I say it, I hear the internal echo of my own failure, which is louder than anything else in the room. The hook is that I've become my own comedic audience, watching myself spiral, while my wife's calm demeanor is the punchline. Comes the moment of panic that makes everything worse. I realize the task I started with is not just unfinished, it's actively worse than when I began. The faucet is dripping, the towel is wet, the trash is scattered, and I've managed to knock over a cup of water onto the counter. I stop and think, maybe if I walk slowly, nothing else will go wrong. But walking slowly doesn't help when your life has been reduced to a series of bad choices in motion. I try to clean one thing at a time, but I'm clumsy, overthinking every movement. The hook is that even the smallest step feels monumental. Each motion is exaggerated, awkward, completely incapable of solving anything. The final layer of comedy comes from self-awareness. I know I'm failing. I know I'm ridiculous, but I can't stop. I glance at my wife, who hasn't moved, hasn't spoken, hasn't offered guidance. The silent judgment is palpable. The hook is that silence is the ultimate comedy tool in this scenario. It's like a spotlight shining on my every misstep, fully aware of it. I continue working in this awkward rhythm of panic and pseudo-effort, knowing full well that the story of my failure is more entertaining than any success I could have achieved, which is exactly the kind of moment Nate Bargatze thrives on turning into comedy gold. By the time I reach the final stage of my helpful husband mission, I realize that my attempt to assist my wife has transformed into a full-blown comedy show starring me as the disaster. They're smart. The hook is that even though I started with the best intentions, every movement, every choice has only added layers to the chaos. I glance around the kitchen, surveying the puddles, the misplaced towels, the slightly skewed items on the counter, the trash that refuses to stay in the bin, and I realize that I am now a participant in my own cartoon. Pick up a sponge with caution, like it's a fragile artifact. Immediately drop it into a pool of water I didn't notice forming on the floor. I bend down to grab the towel. The water from the faucet drips onto my shoes, creating what I can only describe as a tiny indoor swimming pool. And yet, I keep going because quitting feels like admitting defeat. And in comedy, admitting defeat too early is never an option. The hook continues as I try to rationalize my actions in my head. It's okay, Nate. Just focus. One step at a time. But one step never stays one step because every attempt to fix something immediately creates a new problem. Start moving in slow motion, carefully calculating each step, but the sheer number of things I've broken or disarranged has turned simple coordination into an impossible puzzle. Glance at my wife, who remains calmly observing, and I know that her silence is the ultimate punchline. Her eyes follow every small movement, measuring my incompetence, while my brain spirals through a checklist of disasters I've already created. The hook is that silence here isn't passive, it's active, loud, and terrifying in the most hilarious way possible. Then comes the absurdity of realizing that even standing in place is a challenge. Every time I try to stabilize myself, I knock something over. I step back to get a better perspective, only to realize that my foot is now in water. I attempt to remove it gracefully, but grace is a concept that left the building the moment I decided to help. Pick up the towel again, wring it out for the 5th time, and it slips from my hands, soaking my shirt. I glance at the faucet, which seems to mock me with its constant dripping, and I begin narrating my own actions under my breath, smart like a sports commentator describing a catastrophic game. The hook is that self-awareness amplifies comedy. Knowing how absurd everything looks makes the audience laugh even harder because they recognize the futility of trying to manage chaos while still trying to help. Finally, acknowledge the truth. Helping my wife is not about success. It's about surviving with minimal new damage. Every exaggerated movement, every awkward scramble, every muffled exclamation of frustration is part of the spectacle. I notice my own and my monologue growing louder than the actual sounds of disaster around me, narrating a story I can't escape. The hook is that this is classic Nate Bargatze turning a tiny domestic misstep into a full-blown comedic performance. Even though I failed at the simple task, the attempt, the panic, the disaster, and the silence from my wife create a perfect, relatable comedy scene where I am simultaneously the protagonist, the villain, and the punchline, rolled into one chaotic performance that leaves the audience laughing at the absurdity of everyday life.